Welcome. So I'm Martin Gale, so I'm the first person on the list here, and my role is as basically the technical lead for all the things that IBM does with mobile here in the UK and Ireland. So that's everything we do from consulting through software through the infrastructure pieces of mobile as well. And what we're going to talk to you today with my lovely assistant over here, who will introduce himself, Andrew Ferrier, a little bit later on, is talk to you about, I guess, some of the new things that are coming around our mobile platform and how it's going to play into our platform as a service story. So hopefully we'll keep it interesting. So the health warning, this is the most marketing-like slide that you are going to see from us. So neither of us are a big fan of glossy slides and things like that. But this is just to kind of paint a picture about what IBM does in mobile. When IBM talks about mobile first, and we talk about it a lot, there's kind of sort of four threads to it. So the first thing that we're trying to do is set an agenda that mobile is all about helping our customers change the way they do business, whether it's retailers changing the kind of service that we get in stores, or whether it's pilots. So we do, working with airlines about how you can make the pilot experience better and more effective within the framework of sort of, business benefits and all of that kind of stuff. So a business transformation is kind of the high level thing that we see for mobile. And then all the pieces that sit behind mobile, really. So the piece around security. So one of the things that IBM's focused a lot on is, as well as the transformation, making sure it's underpinned by really robust sort of security framework, and making sure that because we're opening up people's businesses to new channels and using them in different ways that they've never used them before, that the crown jewels at the centre of the business aren't compromised as well. The other thing we talk about a lot is this engagement piece, and what we mean by that is all about, well, how can we clearly we can put transactions on a mobile device. We can think about the device as being a glorified web browser where we can just do transactional commerce, those kind of things. But what we're trying to do is create something that becomes a much more immersive, much more sticky experience, a much more fulfilling experience for people. And there's various different capabilities that we have in there, ranging from analytics to see how people are using the apps, to, if you like, deeper analytics to do things like cognitive computing. So some of you may have seen the work we did, something called Watson, where we actually played Jeopardy, built a machine to play Jeopardy. But what we're doing now is looking at how we can take Watson and make that available through the mobile channel. So as well as the power of the analytics, you get it delivered through mobile, so you get the kind of immediacy of it. But the bit we're going to focus on here is kind of the bottom bit, which is sort of the building and managing things at scale. Okay, so you can actually, as everybody in this room knows actually, you can do some quite simple apps very, very quickly in quite a simple way. So I've put some of my own, no critiquing, this is some of my own code here. So, but you can build an app pretty quickly. So on the left, blob of AngularJS, that one actually talks to Watson. It's a little blob of something that I was doing to ask some questions and stuff. Maybe a bit of Node.js, come up with a REST handler, that kind of stuff, and then good old Mongo or something like that sat in the background. So we can do single apps in a very, very simple way, very, very, very quickly, and that's great in particular circumstances. The challenge we find when we work with customers at kind of enterprise scale is that actually things get pretty complex pretty quickly. So some of that complexity comes from the sheer number of apps. So if in a big company, you might be talking about hundreds of apps all over the world. So thinking about how you deal with that scale problem. The other piece is the number of different devices and different operating systems that you need to support as well. Again, that's another, I guess, kind of axis of complexity really that you have to deal with as well, particularly when customers have gone down a route where they say to people, well, you can bring your own device to work and that kind of thing. How do you deal with the fact that you might have some Androids of various different flavors, iOS of various different flavors and form factors and those kind of things? And then the other piece of this is when you've got a number of different back-end systems to connect to all over the place that may be in a greater or lesser state of repair and readiness for mobile. This is adapted from something that Gartner came up with. So Gartner used to talk about the rule of three. If you Google Gartner rule of three, you'll see they talk about some of this different complexity. So Gartner's view is that these three things, and where many is more than three, where variety is more than three, and where back-end systems is more than three, but that all sounded a bit twee. This made a little bit more sense to me. The other things you throw in here is that, say if we talk to the CIO of a company, lots of pressure to introduce mobile technology and transform the way the business is doing things, and they want to be supportive of that, but at the same time, you can't compromise security, can't do anything to, I guess, as we were saying before, expose the kind of the core business to any unusual threats. And organisations are getting more and more familiar with mobile, but it's still that getting people to take that step and realise that these systems work in a different way to the ones that we've been familiar with over a number of years. So yeah, can't compromise security. And we can't have costs spiralling as well. That's the other kind of pressure that we get a lot around mobile projects. So if you've got lots and lots of apps, you've got lots and lots of variety, unless you think carefully about how you do it, your costs can go that way, or probably that way, up rather than down, I should say. And then finally, you've got to deliver really, really quickly, but you can't do anything that's going to hurt the reputation of the company, which is another competing, can be a conflicting challenge as well. So all the benefits of agile and speed and all of those kind of things, but we don't really, for a lot of established companies, they will have a very, very maniacal focus on their brand and not damaging their brand, particularly sort of prestige household names. They don't want to be on the front page of the Daily Mail or something like that because something's gone wrong with their logo on it. So enterprise gets complex quite quickly. So we talk about this notion of, and this has had a few names, right? So we're talking here about what we call a mobile enterprise application platform, which is an industry term, it's not just an IBM term. It has a Wikipedia page, you can Google it and all of that kind of stuff. It exists, it's not something we made up. And what the MEAP, or the MEAP as we refer to it in the vernacular, is all about is trying to help manage some of that complexity. And what IBM's good at and what we're good at with our middleware historically is looking at complex situations and coming up with capabilities that help customers bring that under some semblance of control. You may hear this referred to as variously an MCAP, an MADP, or sometimes an MBAS as well, a mobile backend as a service. They're all kind of flavors of the same thing. Effectively, an MBAS is a cloudy version of where a MEAP came from. But what that is doing for you in general terms is usually there's some component around developer productivity in tools and SDKs and those things. So this is all about we need the advantage quickly. We need to focus on developer productivity, whether the vendor is supplying tools, so whether there's a tool that comes with the MEAP, or more often than not these days, people want to turn up with their own IDEs. They want to use the Android Studio or Xcode or those kind of things, but making it very, very easy and effective for them to do that quickly. I think one of the things with this is when we're in a world where we're valuing working code more than very, very deep documentation, actually one of the roles of the MEAP is to say, well, actually the focus on that working code is really our working code, our different bit. Can we come up with common frameworks, libraries, tools that means that we're not worrying about a whole stack of stuff that somebody else could be providing for us? Some abstraction over the device vendors. So there's various different guises of this. So again, when you're in a world where you've got, even if it's Android and iOS or Windows Phone or BlackBerry, we'll say BlackBerry, and you've got things like certain notifications, for example, all have got different APIs to deal with them, that kind of stuff. Similarly, you'll find that some MEAPs will have a layer of abstraction that runs on the device as well, so to try and get you into a write once, run anywhere kind of place. So examples like Cordova and Xamarin and things like that you may have seen and had a play with. That would be a good example. Something around integration. So having talked before about complexity coming from the fact we've got lots of back-end systems to connect to, the MEAP typically will give you some consistent way of connecting to things, which again, from a kind of code sprawl and from a kind of control and comfort perspective, having some standard way of talking to an inventory system or a commerce system or an ordering system is kind of a comfortable place for most people that run successful businesses anyway. And the other important piece is that the MEAP helps you expose that in a mobile-ready way. So you might have a number of different back-end systems with web services or REST or messaging or something like that sat in front of them, but what you want is something that's highly consumable to the device on the end of it. So the MEAP helps you cross that bridge between the two. Click. The other piece of this is, making sure that you've got consistent access control to everything that's in the system. So, for example, if I make or I want to roll out an app to all of my store associates, I'm a retailer, I want to roll out an app to all my store associates, and I leave, and somebody leaves, what I really want is that when I turn off their access for all the other systems, the mobile channel isn't left up and wide open. We want to have kind of consistent connection with all of those other things. Related to that, from a security perspective, if we're going to start exposing all of our back-end systems to the outside world, well, actually what we don't want is lots of holes punched in our firewall with lots of indiscriminate traffic coming in, talking to all our back-end systems. Having some kind of gateway point where we can say in our network, any traffic from mobile is always going to go through that particular bit of the network is a lot easier to manage and understand, and for security types to get comfortable with. And then last but by no means least, there's a piece in here about, actually, if we've got this kind of single capability providing this platform that we build on, then actually having some kind of management information that tells us who's using which apps, which are the most popular, are people getting stuck, what are people using them for, those kind of things. If you're in this constant refining loop that you find yourself in mobile, it's an inherently agile world, actually you've got some real data and some insight to draw upon so that you can make things better. And now I'm going to hand over to my lovely assistant, hand over the clicker, there you go, who's going to talk to you a bit more about what IBM is doing.
Sure. So just to introduce myself very briefly, my name's Andrew Ferrier. I lead a team of consultants that we have in IBM across the UK and Germany, working very much with IBM's software offerings in the field. So I'm the technical guy who goes in and helps our customers make this real. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to quickly talk through a few more slides. We'll talk about some of IBM's offerings, and then I'm going to show you a quick demo of something that we've kind of released into beta recently, and we can take a look at that. So what we've really been just talking about here is this MEAP that sits right here in the middle of the diagram. Basically, we're building mobile applications, and over here on the system, we have on the back end what we might call, in sort of somewhat boring or old-fashioned terminology, system of record. But what we really mean by that is some form of back-end system, so some database, some services, something that we need to get our mobile application connected to. We have our MEAP that Martin's just been talking about sitting in the middle. Maybe we have that connected out to some form of authorization directory, so it might be some kind of LDAP server or something like that that controls the users and the groups and the folks who use this mobile application. And then it's probably connected to a push notification service in the cloud as well, something like Apple or Google Cloud Messaging, something along those lines. So let's just briefly introduce what IBM does in the sort of MEAP arena. And to do that, we've got to talk about the IBM MobileFirst Platform. Now, in 2012, we acquired a small company based out of Israel and New York called Worklight, and we quickly kind of rebranded that and reworked that to become IBM's MEAP technology. In 2014, we renamed it to the IBM MobileFirst Platform, basically just to kind of sort of slightly more closely fit some industry trends that we saw. And traditionally, customers that we've had who've bought this product, this is an IBM commercial software product, have deployed it on-premise or maybe on some form of infrastructure as a service or sort of server hosting environment, so something like SoftLayer or Amazon EC2. And we've had hundreds of customers using it for many years for thousands of apps around the world. It's been relatively successful for us. Now, IBM MobileFirst Platform, as I say, is a MEAP. It is our MEAP offering. And it kind of helps tick those 6 boxes that Martin was just talking about. So, for example, we provide Eclipse-based IDEs for people who want to build hybrid styles of applications, or Cordova, for those of you who might come across that technology. But we also provide command line tools so that people can integrate it into their own tool set and their own tool chain and their own way of working. We provide a bunch more abstractions on top of base Cordova. So, for example, we provide a thing called the JSON store, which allows you to abstract out the way that you store persistent data onto different devices with a consistent API across all different types of platforms. We provide what we call adapters based in both JavaScript and Java to allow you to sort of consistently integrate to different types of back-end data sources, so RESTful services, databases, that kind of thing. We provide a security model, a consistent security model for both what we would call a mobile-first client, so a client-side application actually running on a phone, and our mobile-first server, which is what takes on the role of our meat, so that we can provide a consistent way of having a security model between those two things. In using a meat like MobileFirst, the meat server, or the MobileFirst server in our case, actually then becomes a kind of single point for all of that integration, for managing app updates, that kind of type of thing. And also we have a major feature within MobileFirst called the Operational Analytics Platform, which I'll be showing you a very brief section in the demo in a minute on, which is basically a way to get understanding of how people are using a mobile application, so what kind of platforms they're using it on, what they're using it for, and so on. Let's switch gears for a second. I've just spoken about the IBM MobileFirst Platform. We're going to whistle through a few things fairly quickly. What I want to also talk to you about is Bluemix. So Bluemix has been around for, what, year and a half, something like that now. And it's kind of IBM's developer-centric PaaS platform, so platform as a service, where we allow folks to go and sign up, build their own applications, build their own services, and host them up in the cloud. And by the way, if you come around to our stand after this presentation, we've got lots of demos. We can talk to you about that in a lot more detail than what we're going to be talking about in this presentation. So this is roughly what it looks like. It's a non-proprietary platform. It's based on an open source technology called Cloud Foundry. And we exploit a bunch of sort of standard open source tech. So folks who've built applications using things like Node.js, Ruby, Go, PHP, Python, pretty much all of these open source communities, there are runtimes for all of this stuff on Bluemix. And one of the really nice things is for developers, you can kind of get started on Bluemix for free. So if you haven't tried it before, you can go and create an IBM ID, you can sign up, you can log into the Bluemix console and have an application deployed on there by the end of the day. You get a 30-day free trial. After that, you have to put in your credit card number, but even at that point, you're not actually paying any money until you go over certain kinds of usage allowances. So it's a pretty nice platform for kind of getting started and experimenting with a whole bunch of different IBM technologies. Just to give you a flavor of a few of the things, in fact, here over on the right-hand side, you can see all of the different services that we support on Bluemix. There's an awful lot of stuff in the bag. I can't possibly talk through it all, but just to give you a flavor, we've got a few services here on the left-hand side based out of our Watson brand that Martin was referring to do things like language translation. So we've got an API where you pump in English text and you might get out German, or you pump in Spanish and you might get out French. We've got a text-to-speech engine where you can pump in text and get speech out the backside. We've got a bunch of mobile-focused services, and one of the recent additions there is something called Presence Insights, which allows developers to build mobile applications that can track where users are going, using things like Wi-Fi, access points, 3G, and so on. And then we've also got some lower-level services. So one example is this application server on cloud feature here, which is basically a way of deploying our WebSphere application server technology onto Bluemix. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. That's kind of interesting, all of it in itself.
Just one thing I was going to say, because it's not just IBM stuff in there as well, because there's quite a lot of partner things as well.
True.
So there's open source things in there. There's IBM, IBM tools, but there's also partner things. So there's Twilio services in there. There's Mongo, the Mongo Labs and Redis and various other things like that. So there's a whole bunch of things. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. No, it's a good point. Thank you, Martin. So we just got to talk about one more thing before we kind of move out of the slide world and into the demo world, and that's Docker. Now, I don't know how much familiarity. Probably everyone in the room has at least heard of Docker at some point. A one-sentence introduction that vastly oversimplifies it. Basically, Docker is a way to virtualize a process that's running on a machine in a way that makes you think it's a little bit like a virtual machine, but it isn't, but it is, but it isn't, but it is. The differences are probably too subtle to go into here, but for all intents and purposes, we can think of it as a way of containerizing software. And you probably all heard about it. It's a big industry trend at the moment. Now, IBM provides an implementation of Docker inside Bluemix, and we call this IBM Containers. It's basically Docker plus a few extra things to make it easier to work with some of the Bluemix services we were just talking about. And we provide both a registry, so a repository for Docker images that you or someone else might have built, but also a runtime engine for those containers to run on Bluemix. And again, this all follows the same kind of model that we were just talking about. Some of this comes for free, so you can experiment with it this afternoon. But if you kind of, you want to run lots of stuff, you take it into production, there's a sort of continuous payment model. So let's kind of smush those three things that we just talked about together. We have had, for a little while, some capability in Bluemix for people to build mobile applications that's been mostly separate from the MobileFirst platform that we were talking about. But people, A, were starting to get a little confused, and B, kept saying, well, this full MEP that you keep talking about, this is great, but we kind of want this on the cloud, right? We want this hosted in some way. So now we're making available this relatively long-named offering here, which is the IBM MobileFirst Platform Foundation on IBM Containers on Bluemix. We don't get to pick the names. There's less source in the product. Exactly. There's less source in the product than there is in the name. But anyway, so basically what we're doing is we're taking the IBM MobileFirst platform and we're making it available through this container stuff on Bluemix. So what I will do now is just switch over and give you a quick demo. Now, one thing I will say, and I'll put this URL up again at the end, all of what I'm about to show you is all based on freely available things that you can do. There's an IBM article on the IBM website that talks you through all of what I'm about to show you. So if you're interested, you can easily go and try this stuff out for yourself. Afterwards. So what you're seeing here is I'm in the demo is I'm sitting inside. And by the way, I apologize for the pre-recorded video here. I wasn't entirely convinced of the Wi-Fi situation, and this demo, as you can see, is very reliant on internet-hosted services. So I just kind of wanted to pre-record a demo just to make sure that went smoothly. But you can see myself here sitting inside the Bluemix console. So at this point, obviously, I've already created an account. I've already signed in. And you can see, by the way, the kinds of things that we can create in Bluemix. So over here are all those 100+ services and APIs that I was just talking about. Up here are what we call Cloud Foundry apps. So these are basically so we can create server-side hosted content. So those Ruby, PHP, Go, Python, all those kind of engines that we were talking about that allow us to run web content from the server side sitting up there. Down here, we actually do have a full virtual machine offering. So that's for sort of VMware style virtual machines. But what we're interested in talking about right now is this containers stuff that sits up in the right-hand side. So I'm going to click there on Start Containers. And it takes me into the containers page. Now, you can see that we can add our own, right? So if, for example, we're building our own Docker-based images offline on our laptop, we can upload them and put them in the registry, and then we'll start to see them appearing here. But you can see there's also a bunch of pre-canned IBM-built ones that are here, and of course, we'll be adding more of those over time as well, I expect. So you can see that we've got, for example, a node-based Docker image here, but the one we're most interested in here is this IBM MobileFirst starter that sits up in the left-hand side. So I'm going to go and click on that. That'll take me into a page where I specify what I want to do with that image. Now, the way Docker works is basically you've got the images, and based on an image, you create a runtime instance of that, and that is called the container. So what we're doing at this point is basically defining the starting state of a container. So I get to specify what space I want to put it in. Space is basically just an administrative concept in Bluemix that allows me to group my services and my images and so on and so forth for different projects. Then I get to specify a name for this container. So obviously I've just given it some dummy name. Get to specify what size it is. Sometimes we might want to deploy some fairly large projects and so on. So I'm going to pick something relatively meaty and give it 2 gigs of memory. I also need to give it a public IP address so that I can get access to it in a minute. And I need to specify some ports that it's going to listen on. And the standard ones that we need for MobileFirst are 80 and 9080. So I'm going to go away, and it's going to chunder away and create that image. Due to a slight niggle, it's now taken me back to the main Bluemix page. But I can go back into my Bluemix dashboard, and I can see any moment now it'll bring up and it'll show me that my container is sitting down here on the left-hand side. So now you can see I've got this brand new container here. You can see it's telling me what the public IP address of that container is. So I'm going to click on that container, and hopefully any second now it will show me the information about that container. If I paused maybe I accidentally paused that. Still running. Okay, sorry, my mistake. Okay, so now I can see the information about my container. Over time, it will start to show information in here about how much memory it's using and so on and so forth. And you can see I can stop it, start it, delete it, that kind of stuff. But in particular, what I want to do now is I want to go and work with this container. Now, remember that what this container does is it basically contains our MobileFirst Platform server, right? So this is the server-side component of our MEEP. It's the thing that contains all of our integration adapters and all of the things that enable us to integrate back-end systems. I accidentally typed in the wrong port number because I wasn't paying attention during my video recording. But now I've typed in the right port number and I've gone to this registration page. I'm going to type in the default username and password, which is admin. I'm going to click on register, and that should take me through to the registration page. Right, now I'm through at the registration page. What you're seeing here is kind of a getting started page because this is the evaluation version of this image specifically for doing demos. I can scroll up and down there, and by the way, you can see there's a whole bunch of links for contacting IBM and going to documentation and that kind of stuff. But what I'm really interested in is this operations console. So this operations console is what any developer who'd been using the MobileFirst platform for some time, even on-premise, even installed on their own server, would be used to seeing. So you can see in here I've got a variety of applications deployed. Those applications are pre-deployed, again, just because this is a demo image. In reality, I'd actually probably have to upload those myself. And you can see over time where it will collect some statistics about how many devices have been using the MobileFirst Platform server, what operating systems have been using it, and so on. Of course, I've just created this image from scratch by creating a new Docker container, so there isn't anything there yet. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip over to Xcode. And by the way, I've just realized the top edge of my video is chopped off, so you actually can't see me clicking on this run button. But any second now, I'll click on this run button here. It'll build my Xcode application. By the way, this is a standard demo Xcode application. Again, the article on the IBM website that I've based this on allows you to download all of this stuff. So if you want to try it out yourself, you can. I haven't modified any of it. So this application is called Wishlist. You can't see that because it's chopped off the top, but you'll just have to believe me that this is running inside an iPhone emulator. Okay, so this application is called Wishlist, and it's very simple. It's got a catalog of a few products that I can buy, and I can add them to my wish list. That's all it does. It's not very sophisticated, but it's enough to show the principle. So if I go into this settings page for this application, firstly, I have to specify the IP address and the port of where I've deployed my MobileFirst Platform console. Now, if this were a real application, of course, we would have hard-coded that into the app somewhere along the line. Because this is just for demo purposes, we have to tell the app where our MobileFirst server actually sits so it knows where to connect to. So I'm doing that, and I'm also giving it what we call the MobileFirst project, platform project name, so it knows where to connect back to. So I'm going to save that. And then if I go back to the home page of the application, and I go to catalog, you'll immediately see some items pop up, and you do. And you'll have to believe me because I'm not demonstrating this directly, but all of this information that you see here is flowing back from one of the adapters that we have sitting inside our MobileFirst Platform server. So that's ultimately coming from a database that we host on Bluemix, flowing through the MobileFirst Platform server, so that one single point of control, that scalable gateway that Martin was talking about, and down to the device. So now I've got a list of items that I can add from my catalog. I can go and click on one of those items, and the first thing it does is it pops up an authentication page. So this is all using the OAuth-based authentication that we were referring to a minute ago. I put in the hard-coded user and password as the user and password. Again, it's all just a demo, of course. And I click Done, and it will then have added my item to my wish list. And due to a slight bug and or niggle in the application, it actually pops up that dialog twice. But obviously, in reality, that would only happen once. What am I going to do now? I'm now going to click on another item, and I'm going to add that to my basket as well. And I'm going to flip over to my wish list. Now, one more thing you might notice here is there's actually 3 items in the wish list, and I've only added 2. That's because I cheated slightly when I recorded this demo, and I already had an item in the wish list before I started this whole process. But in any event, you get the general idea. So we've now got a wish list that's been pulled down, and incidentally, that wish list itself is flowing through a MobileFirst adapter up to our backend database, also hosted on Bluemix as well. And of course, if I flip back to my homepage and I go into the catalog and I add another item to the wish list, again, it has the same bug, which is that this dialog pops up twice, not quite sure why. We'll see we've now got 4 items in the wish list. So it's not particularly sophisticated from a mobile perspective, perhaps, but hopefully demonstrates the principle, at least, of creating the image on the Docker container and working with that. Now, I will say, obviously, there's a few little niggles in this process so far. All of this stuff is very new. We literally only released it 2 weeks or so ago into beta, so hopefully you can kind of forgive those few little hiccups. But hopefully that's kind of enough to give you an idea, at a very high level at least, of what the MobileFirst platform is about and kind of how we can deploy applications. That's the end of that demonstration or that video. As I said, there is, if you go to this URL on the IBM website, there's an article that talks through all of this in a lot more detail, and you can also, if you're interested, follow the same steps and go through that same kind of process. And of course, once you have your MobileFirst server running on Bluemix, running inside that container, you can develop your own mobile applications and use it for whatever you want. You don't have to just follow through what we've done there. So I think that's probably pretty much all we had to say. Does anyone have any questions they wanted to raise right now? Yeah?
Yeah, you mentioned Cordova and
Yes.
Java a lot.
Yes.
I prefer kind of the .NET world.
Right.
How is there kind of implementations into that?
Are you talking about server-side coding, or are you talking about client-side coding?
Client side.
I assume you like Xamarin.
No, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so you can talk about the Xamarin thing.
Could I use Xamarin instead of Cordova?
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
sorry. Yes, absolutely you could. So one of the things we didn't specifically talk about here, we have, so we actually have a partnership with Xamarin, and as a result of that, we have a client-side SDK for, that plugs into Xamarin's client-side technology that allows you to talk to a MobileFirst server. So if you go to, I think it's the Xamarin marketplace, and there's articles plenty on the IBM and Xamarin websites that talk about all this stuff. But if you go to the Xamarin marketplace, you can install a client-side SDK that basically allows you to work with mostly the same APIs as you would get if you were working with the IBM client-side development tools to allow you to talk to the MobileFirst server. So the simple answer to your question is yes.
Any more for any more?
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for listening.
Yep. And I think we're standing between you and lunch, so no more questions?
Leave you to it.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.